official welcome. My name is Amy Amantea, and I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator for VocalEye. I use she, her pronouns. And I will be your host this evening, as I am every Wednesday evening, but a big welcome to this Wednesday, September the 22nd. Tonight, we are proud to offer you our number 56, yes, I said it, 56 almost live virtual VocalEye event. And I'm really excited to welcome in tonight's event folks. So tonight we're going to experience Cinevolution has a media arts festival called Digital Carnival Z, which is absolutely fantastic. So we're going to share with you some highlights from that particular festival this evening. And we have many guests in this space tonight, probably more than we've ever had in this space tonight. And so what I'm going to do is introduce to you our two sort of guest presenters that'll be kind of co-hosting with me this evening. And just know that as each piece gets introduced, we're going to have the artist here to do a little Q&A about their piece. And then we're going to do a giant Q&A at the end for everybody to participate in. So it's a full packed night, friends, but I'm really, really excited to share it all with you. Okay, without further ado, let's welcome our guest presenters into the space. So we have Yun-Jou Chang, who is Cinevolution's executive director and also the curator of the Union exhibit, which we'll see tonight, and we'll get into that in a moment. And we have Minah Lee, who's joining us, who's the associate curator and curated the Digital Carnival Z festival. So welcome to the both of you.
Thanks, Amy. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Yun-Jou. Thank you, Minah, for being here. I think what I'd love to do is just before we talk a bit about Cinevolution and Digital Carnival Z is to give you both the opportunity to just like share who you are. So Yun-Jou, why don't we start with you first? Who are you? What do we need to know about Yun-Jou?
Great question. Way to start us off with an existential crisis, Amy.
No, that's right. I was born, I lived. I know, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I mean, you're kidding, but I mean, really, one of the things I will often share is that I was born in Belgium because my parents are international students at the time, and I grew up between Taipei and Prince Rupert before eventually making my way to Richmond, where Cinevolution now makes its home. My background is in literature and social sciences. And you know that those passions around you know the stories that we tell, how we come together to build community and form connections is what has led me to Cinevolution and continues to guide my work today. So that's me in a nutshell.
In a nutshell, I like it. It's kind of a macadamia nut as opposed to a walnut. Like you did, nice and concise. I love that. Minah, what do we need to know about you?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Minah Lee, and I was born and raised in South Korea. I lived between Busan, which is like a little bit similar to Vancouver, right beside the sea, and also Seoul, the biggest city. And then I came to Turtle Island in 2007. So I have been around a little while, and some, you know, folks in the arts, performing arts, and some visual arts might know me because I've been around for over a decade. But I am a pretty new immigrant here, though. I very recently gained the permanent residency. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And I was a long-term international student. Your parents were international students. I was one.
We could do a whole like Q&A just on that experience in and of itself.
That's right.
But with time being what it is, I'd love to steer the question into what Cinevolution is and what it does as an organization. So it's probably a great question for you, Yun-Jou.
Yeah, so Cinevolution, we are a small grassroots film and media arts organization based in Richmond, BC. We like to say that we are women-led and migrant-run, and that's why, in part, Minah and I started by sharing our lived experience as members of the diaspora and kind of just navigating, diverse cultural waters across languages, across, ways of communicating, ways of knowing the world. And much of the work that Cinevolution does is to build intercultural understanding and to foster intercultural dialogue through film and media arts events. So things like festivals, workshops, film screenings, forums, ways to bring people together to be able to talk about critical issues that affect our lives today, often in a sort of like Asia Pacific kind of international cross cultural context, just as a way to enrich our experiences, but also to provide new frameworks for thinking about and experiencing the world. And that is in large part what Digital Carnival is about as well. Minah, is there anything you'd like to add?
Minah's just on mute, so we'll give her a minute to. There we go.
Oh, I'm good. Yun-Jou, you're covering it really well.
Thank you.
I mean, that's just the first part of the equation. Is Cinevolution is the organization. Then there's the festival, which is programming that the organization has done. So let's maybe talk a bit about Digital Carnival and what this festival is about, how it came to be.
Absolutely. So Digital Carnival is our annual signature festival. We started this program initiative back in 2012, and at the time, it was actually just a part of our larger festival called the Your Continent Festival. And the Your Continent Festival was a 10-day film and media art festival that took place in and around the Richmond Cultural Center. So much of our work has to do with bringing art into public spaces to make it accessible to folks who might not be comfortable or might not be experienced navigating, formal gallery or theater spaces. Maybe they find it intimidating, maybe it's too expensive, maybe it's just not a comfortable space for them. So what we like to do is take the art and, put it in front of them, whether that means going into restaurants and showing a film there while you're eating dim sum, or putting out shipping containers, along public walkways. So you are stumbling across art, as you're just going around town. And so, I think that's, we really appreciate the pleasure of discovery, but also just that's just also part of our approach to accessibility and inclusion within the arts. So Digital Carnival has been from day one kind of an exploration of the relationship between uh, art and technology. And this year, as we were programming the festival, we took on the challenge of taking that experience and bringing it online into the virtual space. Minah, do you want to talk a bit more about maybe the festival theme and some of the questions we were grappling with as we were programming?
Sure, I can speak more to the online exhibition portion of it, definitely in relation to our featured artist exhibition union. We were, in the very beginning phase of the pandemic, a little bit panicked and, oh, okay, we can maybe do our digital carnival this year online, but some new questions really came up. At first, like pretty universal questions like how can we gather people, but later more complex questions like who has the access to those digital spaces, who we haven't reached out to, while we are doing those exhibitions and public programs in the public spaces. So yeah, we wanted to kind of think more about also vulnerability of being able to go virtual while a lot of people, arts presenters, were moving to those digital world. So yeah, dealing with issues of gender, sexuality, and all those like battleground, talking about body, dealing body issues of the body, really kind of really thinking deeply about the vulnerability embedded to it, like surveillance or just technology is not accessible to everyone, um, and our bodies in the digital space. So yeah, kind of perceiving our bodies and technologies as extension of our bodies.
It's a lot to unpack, and I have a feeling we'll get more into some of that as we, transition through this event tonight, and as we go into our Q&A at the end, and we can talk in more detail about some of the challenges with the pandemic, and even how you go about curating a festival like this. I think those are all really great things. You touched on a theme, and I just would love our audience to be aware that most of the pieces in this festival were online, in an online context, but there was one live sort of I'm using air quotes, in-person exhibition that was called Union. And I know, Yun-Jou, you had curated that particular part of this festival experience. And we're about to go into sharing some slides from that particular gallery space. And then the rest of our content will either be videos or audio files that are created with description in them. So that'll be helpful. So Yun-Jou, let's just unpack this theme a little bit before we go into Union, because the whole festival had a theme, and it really kind of, I don't know, I feel like when I had sort of experienced Union from a distance, that it sets up this world of this theme. So maybe talk a bit about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for that question, Amy. So the theme of this year's Digital Carnival was Z, or Z, as Canadians say. And Digital Carnival Z is really about exploring alternative understandings of the relationship between bodies, gestures, culture, and society. So as we were thinking about the theme, we were referencing the gender neutral pronoun Z, spelled Z-I-E, the emergent generation Z, and the possibilities for moving beyond the XXXY binary. And we were really interested in how artists are thinking about, how we occupy and perform the body, but also the identity that is embedded within that. And we were just noticing, I mean, we were also responding to what was happening in our community. So, Richmond, I don't know, I think I would say is a slightly more conservative community compared to Vancouver. And it was a little bit slower to bring in the sexual orientation and gender identification, policy at the school board level. And that conversation came up, I think, in late 2018 and was hugely controversial. There were a lot of, vocal protests and pushback against bringing in that kind of education, at the elementary and high school levels. And we really wanted to kind of interrogate and expand how our own community was thinking about questions of gender and sexuality. And we wanted not only to look at it in the contemporary and current context, but actually think about maybe how gender and sexuality were considered historically or in different cultural contexts. So again, like bringing together different schools of thought, to hopefully like spark and provoke, new ideas and new thinking. And we were really privileged to work with a number of really incredible artists, Nancy Lee and Kieran Bumber, who are our featured artists, as well as the other participating artists, some of whose work you're going to get to see tonight. So yeah.
All right, so we're going to jump right on into Union. So I'm going to get Rick to bring up the first slide of this exhibition, and we're going to talk through these few slides so that folks get an idea of where we are. So Rick, when you're ready to bring up slide number 1. While we're waiting for oh, he's faster than the speed of light. Okay, Yun-Jou, you're going to be our eyes and our describer through these photos, as you also took them and are very familiar with the space. What have we got here?
So we're showing, maybe I'll take a step back and just say our goal through these images is to give you kind of a flavor of the exhibition and a sense of the space and the world that was created. Because Union as an exhibition, it's set in the world 3000 in a post-apocalyptic future. And because of the way that Nancy Lee and Kieran Bumber as artists work in terms of how they create space and immersive experiences, I just want to kind of foreground that. So when you step into the Richmond Art Gallery, I don't know if some of you might be familiar with the Richmond Cultural Center complex, but it's the Cultural Center itself is quite a light and airy building. It's a circular architecture with skylight, lots of natural light. The library, the archives, the museum, it's all in that space. It's kind of where the community goes for arts and culture. But when you step from the rotunda, this light and airy space into the Richmond Art Gallery during the Union exhibition, you're entering a darker space. It's also a cooler space because the HVAC kicks in. But I'd like to think it's part of entering the world as well of the exhibition. And so it's a much darker space, almost a little bit cavernous. And what you then encounter as you go down a ramp is what you see in this image on the screen. So to the left and right, you'll get to see that later, are two projected screens. They're almost life-size, so they fill almost the entire wall, except for sort of a frame around the top and bottom. You see in front of you a sculpture, a half-bust sculpture on a plinth that is also sort of life-sized. It's the sculpture is sort of set at the height of where the artist's busts would sit if they were in person. I think it's like 98% to scale, if we want to get really technical about it. And behind the sculpture, there are these reddish, orangish vinyl panels that hang down as a partition. And behind it, you can sort of see, two things, almost bird-like figures that are hanging from the ceiling. They look a little bit like costumes. They look a little bit, maybe a little bit like puppets. We're not quite sure what it is at this point. And beyond that, just like the glow of light boxes whose images you can't see quite just yet. Another really distinctive feature of the space is the texture of the walls and just the overall which really gives the space its overall ambience. So the walls are black and there are it's actually made up of black garbage bags that have been sculpted to have peaks and valleys. But the way the light hits them, makes it seem a lot more three-dimensional, and it almost gives you the sense of, like a rocky surface. And I'll maybe
Yeah, you feel a little bit like you're in a cave environment, dark, maybe like the world that you're in is very dystopic. Feels very, I don't know, kind of cold and
yeah, almost.
I don't want to say uninviting, but that's, kind of the world that you feel like you're in. It's like, what is this space? I don't know what this is all about. So I think,
Mhm.
when you step in there, it probably makes you ask that question right away because it's an environment that we don't encounter on a day-to-day basis. Can we transition into the next photo?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So where we are, I might invite you to imagine is the year 3000, and the nation state has collapsed, and viral air pollution has limits habitable space and physical contact, um, following a year-long worldwide blackout resulting from an air apocalypse induced cyber warfare in 2024. All digitized information has been lost, and most print materials have been used for fuel. Humans seek refuge indoors, physically isolated but connected via the new cyber world. Touch is forbidden, and intimacy is only encouraged through simulated experiences in the cyber world. So when
A
you,
lot to
so
think
this,
about.
yeah, and it feels so uncanny, right? Coming, like having come through. I mean, we're still in COVID, really.
Yeah.
Um, and it really felt quite prophetic in a way, especially because we had started to talk about the exhibition in fall of 2018. So 2 years before the pandemic actually hit, and then we had the joys of actually trying to build an exhibition through a pandemic, which brought all sorts of challenges. But this image, I think, gives you because the previous image we had adjusted the white balance so that you can kind of see, some of the art objects in the space a bit more clearly. But this kind of, I think, maybe gives you a clearer sense of kind of the dark, the dimness of the space, and it also shows you you can sort of see, center to the center left, the railing of the entrance ramp. So there is this experience of transitioning into the space, so leaving behind our world to enter the world of Union. And here you can see on both sides, the two large video projection screens facing each other in dialogue. So this is a two-channel video, and these videos are in conversation with one another, and they show imagery from the post-apocalyptic world. You can make out faintly, just through the aesthetics of the piece, like there are some very bright reddish orange hues on the screen on the right hand side. You see Kieran Bumber, one of the artists, holding kind of like a provocative pose with her hand raised to the bottom of her chin in kind of this inquiring pose, looking upwards towards the ceiling, and extending behind her is what almost looks like could be wings. And very much there is kind of this, 80s, almost like a Japanese anime type aesthetic. On the left, which is less clear, is Nancy Lee, the other artist. She has blue hair in this image, and she's kind of similarly costumed in kind of that 80s glam outfit. And in between these two screens is the sculpture. So the sculpture is of two people locked in an embrace, and each of them is facing one screen. So there's a lot of dialogue and encounter that's happening in this space right away as you enter it.
Yeah, there's these images are very, very dark. So those that have partial sight, there won't be a lot of contrast here. So I think you did a really good job of setting up the world that we're in. I think what kind of strikes me is this idea that you could be standing in the middle of this space, and it's like on your left hand side there's a screen with a character, on the right hand side there's a screen with a character, and those two characters are having a relationship with each other through these screens, and almost if you're standing in the space kind of through you, in a way, which is kind of interesting and eerie, I think, at the same time, but I think reminds us that physical touch has been right? Like it's been abolished. It's you know, it's illegal, or whatever terms that you used. So you get this sense right away that there's a lot of isolation. And we'll get into
Mhm.
this the details of the sculpture as the slides progress, because I think there's this really nice moment we can talk about. That's the juxtaposition of this world, possibly. Any last thoughts on this particular slide, Yun-Jou, before we switch slides? Keeping us on time here?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I think what I will just say is, I think something that I find myself often contemplating is, in talking to Nancy Lee, who's the creator of this two-channel video piece, she said that she wanted to create a multi-channel video installation because illuminated screens are the medium of our generation. And what they were interested in particular, is also that dynamic, Amy, that you were just describing, where the viewer or the audience becomes implicated in the story because they are surrounded in this space, and they kind of have to be turning their body left and right to decide, which of these stories they're going to engage with and in what order. And in this way, you start to begin to see kind of the interactive nature of how these two artists are working, and inviting people to really bring themselves into the exhibition and into the world.
This might sound like a silly question, but I'm just going to ask it for technicality reasons. Is there audio that happens with these videos in this space, or is it just visual?
There is audio, and I would say my one regret is not to be able to share some of those audio elements with you, because that is probably one of the most it is as important as the visual and sculptural elements of this
Mhm.
exhibition. So Nancy is a filmmaker, but Kieran is actually a sound artist and sound designer, which is what makes them such wonderful collaborators. Luckily, they're actually going to be continuing to work on this project and growing the exhibition, with the hope of bringing some of it online. So hopefully we'll have the opportunity to share some of those sounds with you. But the soundscape of this exhibition is actually, very, very rich, and draws on classical musical traditions from China, and also from India. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, let's pull up that next slide then. Okay, so this is going to be a series of 3 slides that are all very similar. So maybe let's just talk about what these 3 slides are about, and then we'll share some details.
Yeah, I'll talk about them all together. So this series of 3 images are of these large scale posters that are mounted inside light boxes. That's that kind of like bright box in the distance that we saw in that first establishing shot on the walls. And these posters give us a peek just into the world of union. And, it includes a lot of the symbolic elements of the union world. It starts to introduce the virtual world that exists in the world of union, called Gaia. And it also starts to, one of the ways the artists talk about the posters is to call them propaganda posters. Although I think we have, or eventually went with the language of advertisements. But these are propaganda posters that are published by the corporation that built the virtual world, in which people, derive all of their pleasurable experiences. And so, taking this first poster as a starting point, it is so you'll notice, probably for partially sighted folks, that the image is a bit blurry, and this is intentional. So it is also blurry to me. So very faintly, so this is the color is a bright yellow with sort of text that is, a reddish orange hue. At the top, there are 4 large letters that spell the word play. And behind, in repetition, like row after row, from top to bottom, it says, play the memory game. And imposed on top of that background is a black symbol. It almost looks like a little, like the little at symbol in your email address, but with an arrow through the center. And it is slightly pixelated with some more solid lines broken up by vertical striations. And this is meant to sort of resemble and is inspired by QR codes and barcodes, like things that we scan within the union world. The artist had the notion that the symbol might be stamped on somebody's neck, almost like as a tattoo, or possibly as a necklace, something that might be wearable. But it is kind of immediately establishing this idea of memories as a commodity. So in the union world, or rather in the union world, what you can do is you can sell your memories in exchange for ARC credits. So the symbol that we're seeing is for the ARC currency. So you can then take these ARC credits to purchase pleasurable experiences within this virtual world, which is the only place where we can encounter touch and interact with others.
It's very complicated to try and wrap your brain around it, because it's not something that we've ever experienced really but we're in the year 3000, right? And so this is the world that they've created. I'd love to be able to share the other two propaganda posters rather, because they're sort of part of this series of world building, right? So I imagine that if I was in the world 3000 and I was living in Union and it was, run by this company, that this is what I would experience as to, as the form of advertising that would be targeted to specifically to me. So can we bring up the next slide there, Rick?
Yeah, so I'll try to move maybe a little bit more quickly through the images so we have some time to talk about the sculpture. And also you might have some questions as well for us to explore. So in this second image, and Rick, maybe we can zoom in a bit to the poster at the center. So there, the lettering is sort of laying almost flat. It's kind of got that Star Wars aesthetic, as the letter is coming up at a slight angle to the screen, and the text reads, "A deeper way to connect." And beneath that, in smaller font, in all caps, "You are never alone." And at the very bottom in fine print, so on the left-hand corner, you see lettering that spells Gaia, G-A-E-A, and that's the name of the corporation that runs this virtual world. And on the right-hand corner, you see ARC, which is the name of the virtual currency that people use to purchase their experiences. And between that, in very, very fine print, almost kind of the terms and conditions, right? Whenever we sign up for a prize draw, it says, "Don't get left behind. With a simple cyber-neurological implant, you too can help build the new world. Experience limitless connection with the Gaia seed. Immersion so real, you'll stay forever." Dun, dun.
It's I'm so impressed by the depth of thought that has gone into like the artist's creation of this space. Like they've really thought of just about everything that can make you feel like you are actually in the year 3000 when you're in this space, which is both for me enjoyable and creepy at the same time, if I'm honest. But I think that's probably the purpose, is like, imagine yourself in this space.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, these are really artifacts from that world, right? That we, because I'm always curious, whether how we're meant to place ourselves in time. And I, go back and forth, are we, are we visitors from the future, looking back at the year 3000 and the world that had existed at that time? Or are we kind of being given a crystal ball and looking into the future? And I definitely go back and forth between, which I think, but I think both reading is super fascinating. Yeah.
Let's show the third poster. Rick's just gonna switch them out.
Yeah.
And we might have to
Wow.
magnify. Yeah, there you go. Thanks, Rick. He's zooming in on this one for us, friends. All
Thank
right,
you,
what
Rick.
have we got here? This actually kind of looks to me like the surface of a birthday cake, but I'm sure you're gonna tell me I'm wrong.
It really does, doesn't it? Yeah, especially the lettering, which kind of looks like, you know, icing, especially like icing that I would make because I'm not very good with fine motor control, especially when it comes to cake decorating. But this image, the third in the series, again, is promoting, you know, the Gaia world and kind of trying to seduce us right into this virtual world where all of our pleasures can be found. And the four words, which is quite hard to make out, I definitely had to be told to be able to see it. They are serotonin, dopamine, endorphin, and oxytocin. So these are the four pleasure hormones. And at the very top, again in very, very faint lettering, and I just want to add that the lettering is, I think, a lot of the times deliberately hard to read or deliberately small, because I think on some level these messages are also meant to be subliminal. You know, we're not quite supposed to be able to figure it out, and that's why when you read, like as I'm reading it out to you, you know, it is meant to be like almost a little bit creepy and a little bit uncanny. You know, the words seem totally innocuous in and of themselves, but there is this like underlying sense of menace, you know, that kind of pervades it. So in this poster, the text at the top reads, "The Gaia Enlightened Pathway consists of four distinct pillars, each unlocking a new tailored experience and designation." And so in this case, like they're starting to bring in this idea of like gamification. You know, a lot of this language I think is very similar to what we might encounter in video games. You know, this idea of like leveling up or unlocking the next level. And obviously, you know, the more time you spend in the game, the more likely you are to be able to go to the next level. And that in it itself becomes kind of this feedback loop of pleasure, but we really as subjects are starting to become entrapped in this world where we are contributing to the profits of the corporation the more time we spend in this environment and giving them our data, right? So that's kind of the real world connection here is, you know, our experience on the internet, the more time we spend on these various platforms, you know, collecting likes, collecting reactions, you know, and as we are choosing what to click, choosing what information we want to consume, what we like, all of this data is being collected by the corporations in our world and then used to sell things to us in turn.
Is it, you know, can we extrapolate? What is this saying about capitalism? Again, like the year 3000, right? Like capitalism goes, you know, it's like the one thing that never dies,
Yeah,
just gets recycled.
absolutely. And becomes more sophisticated. Like one concept the artists that are really central to their analysis in creating this world is the idea of surveillance capitalism, which is coined by Shoshana Zuboff. I won't go into the full details here, but I do encourage you to look it up. There are a number of really interesting talks, and the book is also available, I know, at the Richmond Library.
Surveillance capitalism. Okay, interesting. Any last thoughts on this poster, or can we take a look at what's next?
Let's keep moving.
Awesome. Okay, so you're gonna have to unpack this one for us. We are behind those red orange divider stanchions that you were talking about. So at the very back of the space, right?
That's right.
What have we got
Yeah.
here?
So as you move behind the, you know, those divider panels, you know, on the right, you'll see the light boxes, but on the left, you see these sort of bird-like figures hanging from the ceiling. And when you come closer, you start to be able to make out that they're probably, you know, costumes or outfits of some kind. And what they are wedding dresses. that have been designed for the future, and they have been made of plastic, like sort of like PVC material. And so I will say that this exhibition, I mean, Nancy Lee and Karen Bumber are the main artists, but they also worked with a large team of creative collaborators, including Adam Lim Bungag, who created who designed the wedding dresses. And so these dresses, as he was creating them, he was really also thinking about what kind of materials are actually available in the year 3000? What is our relationship with textile in a dystopian future? So, after an air apocalypse, there's no more cotton, there's no more linen. All we got is plastic. And so he made that decision pretty early on. And originally he was wanting to work, he started by researching traditional wedding dresses in the Chinese and, Indian traditions. But then eventually decided to kind of depart from that, based on this idea of this notion of culture making, that culture is what we make of it. Because at the center of Union, within this entire post-apocalyptic landscape that I'm describing to you, is a wedding that is taking place between two women, or what appears to be, feminine presenting figures, one of which is of Sino-Chinese descent, Sino-Han's descent, and then one of which is of Punjabi Sikh descent. So it's actually this intercultural wedding, this intercultural union that is taking place in the future. And part of why this wedding is set in the future is actually because the artists, as queer women of color, were having trouble imagining when or how they would ever be able to have access to a wedding ceremony, within their cultural traditions, because both within Chinese traditions and South Asian, traditions, there really isn't room for homosexual unions, and so their own queer identity was kind of at odds with the cultural ritual. But at the same time, it's also about how can they participate in weddings as a heteropatriarchal ritual in good conscience, and still embody their own politics and activism. Mm-hmm. And so through this exhibition, they're really imagining that wedding, and the dresses are the starting point for that conversation. Yeah, maybe Amy, I'll let you ask questions because there's so much in my head.
I know there's a lot of symbolism here, but I'd love to go back to just describing what's in the image. So I recognize, as you had pointed out, the walls that were made out of black garbage bags, that these two dresses, there's two of them, are backdropped by this cave-like sculptured wall that's made out of this black plastic material that's quite creepy. And there's this I make out this red glow, so everything's got kind of a red hue on this black creepy texture stuff, and to just maybe point out that the two wedding dresses are like life size, and are kind of hanging sort of freeform, like puppetry from a ceiling maybe. But I'd love for you to just talk quickly about some of the details that are included in these dresses, because of course you've identified that they're made out of sort of plastics, but they feel to me, from what I can make out, that they're not nice and flowy. They're kind of like rigid and stiff, and I could be getting that wrong, but maybe you can talk about the qualities of the dresses.
That's right. Yeah, I think there's a tension there, because I think the materials, I think they are harder than what we might normally see or imagine in a wedding dress. It's more metallic, it's more stiff, it's more structured. At the same time, there is still that sense of flow in terms of there are very long sleeves on both of these dresses and long trains. They are sort of floor length. you know, and the primary color palette is black and red. And I think what's interesting about how the dresses have been hung in the space, you know, which is as if they are being filled. Even though there isn't anybody wearing the dresses at this time. So they're being suspended from the ceiling, almost as if somebody is inhabiting them. And I think that is, you know, and it really just gives the dresses like a particular presence in the space. The materials like are reflective, but I think you're right, Amy, that they are a bit forbidding. It's a challenge to describe them for sure um, because the designer made a deliberate decision to depart from traditional designs. So it's almost hard to kind of find analogies or metaphors for what they look like. I think I would describe the dresses as kind of being constructed out of panels. You know, so there is a sense of them being pieced together. I think the dress on the right hand side, if we are able to zoom closer, you can also see some interesting like detailing like around like the clasps and fixtures. So again, sort of like some metal elements that are also in the you know, in the construction of the dresses themselves. So they're not soft, they are not frilly, and you know, so very much in a lot of ways kind of like in opposition to kind of the traditional white wedding dress.
Yeah, I for me, because I grew up, I'm a Westerner. Sometimes I say I have no culture because truly, when you see cultures around the world, they're quite beautiful. But what I know of wedding dresses is this sort of virginal white, you know, lace stuff, and every television show, the Say Yes from the Dress, and all the wedding shows that talk about these different kinds of. So if I was in this space, for me, not having the lens, the cultural lens here, I probably wouldn't recognize that these are symbolically supposed to be wedding dresses. So I wonder, is there anything that identifies them as such? Like, is there, I don't know, a plaque that talks about what this piece is when you go into the space, so that you are part of that story, that you recognize that the symbolism of what this is saying? Or do you just have to figure that
Mhm.
out for yourself?
There are a couple of things that kind of help. So there is the artist created some basically they printed didactic posters. So if you had gone to the exhibition, you would be able to take home one of those posters that we saw on the walls. So the poster on one side, and on the back is the artist's notes for that,
Mm.
the kind of describe each of the works and kind of what they were thinking about when they were creating them, also with quotes from the creative collaborators. Another thing that the artists did to try to make the exhibition a bit more accessible for folks is they did a lot of tours, like artist-led tours for the public. So probably I would say almost every single weekend, and also by appointment, the artists were in the gallery leading tours through the exhibition where they were talking about their creative vision, explaining the world, and introducing the pieces.
Mhm.
And so those were the ways that they were trying, because this is really a very conceptual exhibition.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the way, like it can be quite difficult to access, even though there is also a artist statement, but I think that can also be quite dense, and it kind of really focuses on the theoretical framework of the dress and the surveillance capitalism.
So I think, given the time that we have for this exhibit, we need to move on to the sculpture work. So Rick, will you pull up the next photo? And these should be the last two in memory. So that we're going to share two photos of the sculpture. So Yun-Jou, you're going to talk about this positioning of the sculpture. So I'll leave it in your hands.
Yeah. So we come back to the sculpture, and this is a very important piece in the exhibition because this is where the union happens. You know, the union really depicts the story of these two individuals who were previously living in isolation, coming together, you know, and connecting with one another through this sacred cultural ritual, and it brings back touch, you know, into the world of union, and touch then starts to act as a symbol of the resistance the refusal to be co-opted by the corporations, like the refusal to be deprived of culture. And in this image, you see, so the sculptures are they're sort of like of the bust. So they're of the Nancy and Kieran from the waist up. And so in this image, we see Kieran's face and half of her body with her breast exposed and her arm hanging down. Her eyes are closed and her expression is very peaceful, and her face is very, very still. We only see Nancy's back and her arms wrapped around Kieran's back. She has short hair, but we can't quite see it in this angle. But what is really striking, sorry, excuse me, what is really striking about the sculpture is how incredibly detailed it is, but also the smoothness of the finish. So what might be of interest to you is to know that this is actually a 3D printed sculpture. So it was produced by doing white light scans of the artist's bodies in various pieces, and then the sculpting was actually done entirely in a computerized environment. And then the sculpture was printed in pieces. It was printed in 16 different pieces, then glued together, varnished, painted, and then polished to this effect. If we move to the next image, we can see the sculpture from a different angle. So this is the other side. So we now see in the foreground, Nancy's head, her chin over Kieran's shoulder. Her eyes are also closed. Her face is also very still. And you see Nancy's hands resting, one on Kieran's lower back and one on her upper back. And Rick, I wonder if you are able to zoom in a bit for us, because you can really see the imprint that Nancy's hand is leaving on Kieran's waist, and even her nails, are kind of like very precisely detailed. And so working in 3D printing really allows us to capture these very, very fine details that are otherwise hard to get at within traditional, sculpting materials like marble or rock.
Yeah, you can, I mean, this is, for all intents and purposes, this is a hug.
It is a hug.
But you can see what is evident for sighted folk is that it feels very flesh-like, right? It feels very much like, when you wrap somebody's hands around you and you can kind of feel the imprint that they leave in your back, and that tells me the quality of the embrace, right? This is not just a hug because you hug this person every day. This is like a longing hug. This is like you said, a union that's really important to these two people that likely haven't been able to connect for a long time. So I really appreciate knowing that detail.
Yeah, and I think that language of the longing, Amy, you're spot on. Like it is, the artist really wanted to express that sense of yearning, to come together. And the union is both literal and symbolic, right? So there's the embrace, the hug that is happening, but there's also this idea of, finally being able to reconcile with your culture, with your gender identity, like coming to terms with who you are, and having space where that can be held. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so a lot packed into that sculpture there for sure.
It's a hugely interesting and I think important exhibition because of all of these messages that it's bringing in. And so I really appreciate you being able to just share with us highlights of what this is, because of course, if you're in this space, you would be spending much more time with these pieces. If you're on this tour, you'd be, although we have you to ask these questions, but you would be able to engage with this world in a different way. And we're bringing you, Yun-Jou's experience, but slides that we're describing. So it's a different kind of experience. And I bet you there'll be some really interesting questions when we get to the Q&A about this world and this piece and how it connects with the other three pieces, and these are shorter pieces, but the three artists that are joining us to share these three digital pieces that are coming up, how this world of union relates to those pieces as part of the overall theme of the festival, which I think will be really interesting to get into discussing. So this is your opportunity for any sort of final words on union before we move to the next piece, if you have any.
Yeah, I think I will only say too, like, I think what is really important in the exhibition through the sculpture and through the other pieces is the notion of touch. And that was hugely influenced by the pandemic and the fact that we were not able to touch and to come together for so long. So actually the exhibition became infused with a lot of that energy of longing, you know, after a year of being in quarantine and relative isolation. So when you come into the exhibition space, everything is very, very richly textured, from the video to the sculpture to the dresses. And that is something that you, really physically experience when you go into the space.
Thank you for sharing this. I'm excited to hear that this is something that the artists are continuing to explore, because maybe it'll be an opportunity to resurface at some point for folks to actually be able to go in and experience in person. Okay, that was a lot. I know that was a lot, but let's transition a little bit here, and I want to focus our attention on a digital piece that we're going to play in just a moment, and Minah and Yun-Jou can introduce this piece. This piece is called Reflection of Me by Natasha Bacchus, who also goes by Courage, so I will be referring to them as Courage. And I would just love for the two of you, or one of you, or both of you, to introduce this piece before we share it. What would you like to say about this piece?
I'll be really brief and give more room to the piece themselves and their artists. So first we're going to start with Reflection of Me by Natasha Courage Bacchus. And this piece is really about self-love and practicing self-love while the colonial forces really violate who she is and who you are. Let's...
Awesome. And for our audience to know, we do have Natasha with us here tonight, who will talk a bit about the piece after we play it. And Natasha is connecting with us through ASL interpreters this evening. So we'll be able to maybe talk a bit about that experience as well, because it may be new for many of us in this space to be in spaces with ASL interpreters. So Rick, why don't you go ahead and play Reflection of Me, and we'll come back and talk about it.
This is a 2-minute introduction to the 5-minute, 32-second video entitled A Reflection of Me by Natasha Courage Bacchus. To accommodate this introduction and audio descriptions, plain black footage has been added at the start of the video, and the video has been extended at the end. The artist is featured in the work. The following is her artist statement. During the COVID pandemic, systems have presented barriers in accessibility. The Black Lives Matter movement has also caused me to look inward and examine who I am. The video I made and the 4 images at the end of it are significant as they reflect my identity as a Black, deaf, queer woman. My lived experiences of these layers of identity overlap and intersect one another. The image of my reflection in the mirror is important because the mirror offers me a chance to look at the present and who I am, to see myself as pretty, as an amazing person, and to be able to see the value in my identity, strength, and the space and location of where I am. Society and systems have caused trauma in my life, and the image of looking at myself in the mirror invites me to reflect not only on my past traumatic experiences, but also to look ahead to what is possible through positive changes. Changes within systems and society that allow for empowerment, collaborative unity, and respect for my identity in all of it. Natasha prefers to be called Courage. Courage is a 43-year-old Black woman with short hair. She is an athlete and very toned. Physically, her movements are energized and smooth. In the video, Courage has tattoos which are briefly visible on her forearm and lower back. She wears a wig of tight black curls wrapped in African wrap, which is white with a blue and yellow pattern. She wears earrings that are 2-inch dangling gold birds in flight. She wears a yellow tube top made of a light knit fabric. The video is filmed in a corner of Natasha's apartment. She has a full-length mirror with a thick orange frame beside a window. It is a sunny day. She has bright orange curtains which are tied back and other white and orange furniture and decor that is glimpsed momentarily. Over video footage, a title in white letters appears, Reflection of Me by Natasha Courage Bacchus. In a close-up, the camera view pans down the back of Courage's head and muscular back. Stuck to her bare skin are labels which are strips of 1-inch wide cloth tape with handwritten words. On her left shoulder is angry/bitch. At her mid-back, transgender, nigger. On her lower back, big ass. The camera view pans upward. Her right shoulder is labeled too dark black, and under this, male. The view widens. Her spine is labeled slut, big nose. All 7 labels are visible 2 or 3 at a time. She sits with arms in front of her. Standing, she looks at her reflection in a full-length mirror. A plant and window appear in the reflection beside her. She breathes deeply. She brings her left palm to her forehead and holds her right at belly button height. She signs in ASL. Subtitles: I am beautiful. I am not afraid. I am strong. Her pointer finger touches her chest. She indicates her face, touches her chest, her chin, crosses her chest, bringing her hands into an X shape. She smiles. I am beautiful. I am not afraid. I am strong. Her right hand runs over her left shoulder and she peels off the label that reads angry/bitch. She looks straight ahead and drops it to the floor in front of her. The view switches to a close-up on her back. Her left hand reaches over her right shoulder. She slowly peels off the label that reads too dark black. And drops it to the floor. Her left arm reaches behind her back and peels off big ass. It is dropped. Her right arm twists to pull male from her right shoulder blade. Her left hand rests on her belly. She drops the tape. Twisting her left arm behind her, she pulls big nose from her left shoulder blade. Strung high between her shoulder blades is the label slut. She reaches, wiggling her left fingertips higher, and gets it. It peels off smoothly. It joins the pile on the wood floor. At her lower back at right, transgender is peeled away, leaving nigger as the last label. It comes off in her right hand. And is held over the others for a moment before she drops it. She raises hands to heart pressed together in prayer. She nods. Subtitles: I am beautiful. I am not afraid. I am strong. You are beautiful. You are not afraid. You are strong. Yes, I am beautiful. I am not afraid. I am strong. She dances alone in an African dance style, kicking up her legs, turning on the spot and isolating the movement of her chest, then shoulders. She signs to her reflection in the mirror. Subtitles: I'm taking African dance class every month because I want to connect with my African ancestors who lived through slavery and were liberated for us. Thank you. and I honor you. I concede I grew up colonized. I used code switching in white stolen lands. Black Lives Matter impacted me and made me look deep within at my traumas and my experiences that caused me to let go of my African ancestral dance that I never grew up learning. This year, in 2021, I will make the effort to honor my African ancestors who escaped slavery for a new life and liberation for us. African dance inspires me and makes me feel joy. She smiles. A collage of 4 photographs of courage. Farthest left, she wears black and stares into the camera, arms crossed. At center, she strikes an exaggerated pose, leaning forward in provocation with both hands in peace signs. On the right are 2 stacked images. On top is a black and white photo where she is in an old-fashioned portrait pose looking at the camera, unsmiling, hands folded in her lap. In the last photo, she is captured looking over her shoulder into the bathroom mirror. Credits: Natasha Courage Bacchus, filmed and edited by Alexandra Hickox. Artist logos: Facebook, Courage, BACCHUS, Instagram, @100courage. Undivided Productions, Facebook and Instagram, @Undivided Production, YouTube, Undivided Production. Captioned by Interpretations and Captions by TSLIS Media. Logo, TSLIS Media. Audio description by Superior Description Services, written by Rebecca Singh in consultation with Vivian Chong, voiced by Rebecca Singh.
Okay, thanks for that, friends. I think we'll get Courage spotlit, please, and the ASL interpreter spotlit as well. I'll just wait for that 2 spotlights to come up. I don't know about you, friends, but in listening to this piece, I feel deeply impacted by it. And thank you, Courage, so much for allowing us to share this piece and to share part of your experience. So first, welcome to the space.
Hello, everyone. Hello.
I wonder if I know that it's part of the description, but I wonder if there's anything you'd like to do in terms of introducing yourself, because we are primarily a blind audience. So is there anything about yourself that you'd like to share with us, knowing that we may not be able to visually experience who you are?
Sure, yes. My sign name is Courage. My name is Courage, and this is my sign name. I'm a Black, queer, femme woman. I have dark skin and dark hair. I have my hair, it's short, growing out locks. I'm sitting in a video gaming chair, black and white. I'm sitting in a corner, a white corner, on the entrance to an apartment. There's some hangers, and there's a protest, Indigenous protest poster behind me. I'm wearing a pink and white, purple tie-dye t-shirt. I'm wearing a gold watch, and I'm wearing dangly earrings.
Lovely.
And it's showing the Horus Egyptian symbol.
Lovely. Thank you for that detail. Let's talk a bit about reflection of me, if you're open to it, just why we've invited you into this space tonight. Where do you come up with the idea for a piece like this? It's an assumption just to say it's lived experience. So I'm wondering how you how you develop something like this.
Sorry, my apologies. Sorry, I'm just adjusting.
No worries.
Can I ask you to repeat the question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering where the inspiration was for you to create this piece. What is it that you want the world to know about what you're saying?
Thank you for that question. I've been involved in theater since 2019, and I'm learning more about my arts practice and some of my hidden capacity and skills. And so I wanted to be able to express myself. And so this is my first foray into mixed media work and self-expression. And I feel good about it. I feel good about talking about my personal experiences and how it's impacted me, some of my trauma, and I'm kind of going through a healing journey. And by expressing myself, it's been helpful. I kind of find art to be healing. Yeah.
I find art to be healing too. Do you also find that art could be a unifying message for folks in general, like a way to bring us all together?
Yes, I would agree. I think sharing your emotional positivity is impactful to your audience. And I think if people are in similar situations to myself, they connect. I think people oftentimes experience oppression, trauma. You do have some of those things, the values that you have, you know that you need to let go.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm learning through my art to express myself and to heal.
Thank you for sharing that. I want to talk a bit about this idea of labels, which I think you found one of the most engaging ways of explaining that in this piece. And I, as an artist myself, sometimes I struggle with the art to figure out the best way to communicate something. So talk to me a bit about the process of the labels and how you choose what gets written on these labels and the symbolism of the shedding of the labels. I'd love for you to go into that.
Sure. I would love to share that. Yes. Before, I was thinking about a way to show the labels somehow on my back, but what's safe for my skin. And my team suggested using tape. Perhaps we can use tape, and that makes it sticks to you. That idea of the label sticking to you and letting it go by physically removing it. And there's a sense of pain because you're peeling it off and it has stuck, but then you feel relieved as it's finally removed from your skin, removed from your body. And so the whole idea of the mirror and the reflection, I love to look at my reflection. And so holding on to those labels inside of you, the anger, the frustration, those things that are stuck to you through trauma, when you were marginalized, when you were oppressed. So pulling those off reminds me to let go. And looking at the mirror, I learned to love myself. I learned to not be afraid, knowing that I'm beautiful, and talk to myself. And so I talk to myself in the mirror. I look at myself directly, and I don't see what society sees. They don't know me. They don't know me the way I know myself. And it's okay to talk to myself in my reflection, anywhere I go, to think about myself. And, you think about how the trauma has affected you, but you also think about how the trauma affects other people. And I wanted to show that I can look at myself in the mirror and feel good. And growing up, I didn't always know that, but looking at my reflection, I think it makes sense to look at yourself every day and to put it out there and remember that some of those labels are there and some of those traumas have affected you. But if you look in the mirror, that introspection, I think, has helped me. And again, I'm on my healing journey, and I've found it very helpful.
Thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing that. I wonder, because in this piece, you also talk about reconnecting with your African heritage and taking African dance. Can you share with us a little bit about how that is involved in your artistry? Maybe it's just this piece, but maybe it's a wider part of what you do as an artist, and maybe how that relates to this journey that you're talking about on that you're embarking on.
Yes, I've from November 2020 to 2022, I will be involved with the Wild Seed Black Arts Residency with 9 other artists, Black artists. I'm the only deaf Black artist as part of the group, but they've given me so many resources and tools. And we talk about our Blackness and we talk about advocacy and some of those values and equity. All of those topics and all of those themes have caused me to think and introspect and start to do some more research about my own family's history and ancestry. So what I know of my family is that we're from Guyana, but I know that we do have African roots. There was a transatlantic slave trade, and Guyana was a part of that. But when we think about my DNA, I believe my family is originally probably from the West Africa, Southern Africa. I don't know what is the history of African slaves who may have been deaf. And so Wild Seed Residency has talked about our history and our ancestry. And I feel lost. I feel like I'm missing something. I know about myself, but that part of my history, my ancestry, yeah, I'm starting to do research. I started to research on Google about Black slaves and deafness, and I wasn't able to find anything. So I started doing some more research. There is more research that's American-based, but it's not necessarily the clearest. I'm not necessarily finding information about historically deaf Black people. And so I've decided to start taking African dance, and I feel so happy from doing that. And so is it me connecting with my ancestors? I think it's that DNA. I think it's the being able to move, and moving makes me happy. I enjoy it very much. And African dance is beautiful and it makes me feel joy. So now my journey, I'm still trying to learn about my family and our past, and it's a process. But Black Lives Matter really did hit me hard. And so the Wild Seed Arts Residency has taught me to open my eyes. And so this journey, I'm still in the process. It's not over. Yeah, I'm still in the middle of my journey.
I often think that, you know, those of us who identify as equity seeking folk, it's like the work is never done. The journey is a lifelong journey. There's no finish line, right? We just continue to explore and experience and discover and connect and all of those things that are so important as artists, but as people as well. I guess I know you're sticking around for the Q&A at the end, so I have some other questions to ask you later, but I think what I'd love to just ask you one more thing about this particular piece, Reflection of Me, is how you designed the arc of the piece, which I thought was really nice. Like I'm listening to the piece more than I'm visually seeing the piece, but there's this arc of like, if my assumption is that the arc is of sort of the labels that society has put on you, but how you view yourself in juxtaposition of that. But then you end with this, like, my interpretation is almost a celebratory dance. And I'd love for you to talk about what that integration of that dance means in this piece.
Yes, the dance reminds me that I can celebrate every day. Of course, your trauma you carry with you, and it's always painful, and you feel the frustration and the hurt and the grief, but at the same time, you need to have your joy. And so I've woken up and understand that part of your journey is letting go, and part of the process is always learning and researching and more of the introspection. And so I'm looking at my inner child. I'm thankful to Black Lives Matter for being loud, and I'm thankful to the Wild Seed Arts Residency for opening my eyes to this journey, and yeah, waking me up to positivity around all this. In recognizing all of this, there can be positivity. And so that reflection of myself, my art, I feel like I did it, I made it happen. This is, like I said, my first foray into mixed media art, and yeah, I value my work, and I'm happy to share it with all of you. And I hope that you all enjoyed it.
I very much enjoyed it, and we'll get a chance for the community to ask some questions in the Q&A that's coming up after we share all of the works. I guess one other thing I would love to just ask you to touch on is so I identify as an artist, and of course I'm legally blind, and uncovered a lot of barriers in the arts world. And I wonder, for yourself, are there any barriers that you've experienced that you'd love to be able to share with us in terms of accessing art or creating art the way that you want to, or finding platforms to share art?
And Amy, we're just switching interpreters. Danica is going to be interpreting the answer.
Great.
Go ahead.
Thank you
Danica.
for that. So we'll just give a moment for the interpreters, friends.
Wow. Wow. That is a big question. I have experienced more barriers than I can count. Just for example, one barrier that I experienced was recently in Toronto. There aren't a lot of BIPOC or deaf artists before me to look up to get my inspiration from. I'm a deaf Olympian, and I have been involved in the Olympics for some time. And I have met two Black deaf Olympians before, but I haven't met any deaf Black artists. So that's really lacking in the community. I'm a pioneer in this realm in Canada. So, I mean, also another barrier of experience as well too, is just, not seeing enough deaf Black actors as well too.
Just going to clarify, Danica, dark-skinned actors. So Black actors, but specifically darker skinned Black actors are lacking, and there's not that representation. Continue, please.
So, I mean, of course, I experience barriers every day. And it is my duty to break down those barriers, to educate, to uplift the voices of other Black deaf artists. And so, every day I work to do that. It's not an easy task, but it's a journey for sure.
It's just another piece to the journey that you're on as a human being. And I value your time and sharing that with us, because I think that this idea of barriers, certainly in this community, resonates quite heavily, because folks that live with blindness and partial sight experience many barriers as well. Thank you, Courage, for joining us to talk a bit about Reflection of Me, and thank you for sticking around for the Q&A at the end. I'll ask our audience members to think about questions they may have for Courage, and we'll kind of unpack some more stuff as we go along. Is that okay, my friend?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Awesome. All right, folks, that was Courage sharing their piece, Reflection of Me. And I have so many questions. We could have filled our whole space with any of these artists, because they're so interesting and the work is so rich. But I want to transition to our next artist. So I'm going to get Minah and Yun-Jou back in the squares, in the Hollywood squares, we're going to call those. And friends, how would we like to introduce this piece?
Yeah, our next piece is Negev, Varod, Seeing Pink by Mickey Morgan. And it's about pink washing, and Mickey is also here tonight, so you'll hear all about it. To me, it's really about, this piece is about reimagining colors for their ancestral land that is really torn apart by racism and violence. So we'll, share this work. Audio version of the book.
Yeah. So this, friends, will be an audio version, so there won't be any visuals for those of you who have partial. And I should just remind folks, and I should have done this at the beginning, and my apologies for not, but all of these pieces are very engaging, very much related to lived experience, and may have some things that might be triggering for you. So if you need to disengage at any time, please feel comfortable to do that, but also to allow yourself to view these pieces through the lenses of the creators. So I'll leave you with that. Rick, why don't we go ahead and play Seeing Pink?
Negev, Varod, Seeing Pink. You call it pink washing? Like rose-colored glasses cast over desert, turning the dust thrown into the ether by stones, flung from small fists by democratic bombs, tossed from the tippy top of the Golan Heights into the depths of the West Bank, turning ash to dust into cotton candy. Pink, like the apartheid nation-state of Israel, is the only place in the blood-bathed Middle East that won't eat you, bones and all, just for looking two-spirit, lesbian, bi, transsexual, genderqueer, ace, intersex, or something. This nation-state is the only safe haven in this land full of nomad savages. Be careful. Keep mace in your pocket. The IDF will take care of any problems white functioning bodies may have. But you should probably live in Tel Aviv North, not the ghetto, just in case. The haze that washes the horizon over the city is so thick, so bright, you would be forgiven for thinking it's early morning sun kissing the Shemayim. To the heavens, the assimilated patriarchs pray, Moda ani lefanecha. Thank God I'm not a woman, or queer, or brown, or crippled, or all of the above. Thank God, only the masculine, for cis gay Ashkenazis who think that they're white, and that charity under neoliberalism isn't just a fancy way of saying vaccinated against our kin. But what of the bloodlines? Of the strings between us, tied to the fringes by we don't remember who, of the crimson mixed with the toasted minerals of the desert having flown like rivers down the bodies of children fighting their great-grandparents' war as family heirlooms, of the elders curled into the crevice of the West Bank, hands clutching a key, of Palestinian and Mizrahi trannies and dykes marching in the straight Black Panthers kin to the freedom fighters here on Turtle Island. Our many living ancestors, their eyes tasting pennies, dripping down from a head wound worn as tefillin, a perfect shade of rage. Can I finally find pronouns that fit from this ancient language of resistance? Is revolution a color of mourning?
Okay, welcome back, friends. Whew, we got a lot of really stimulating things to talk about this evening, and I'm really excited to welcome Mickey into the space. Hello, Mickey. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. It's been a long time since we've chatted, and I just, for the benefit of our audience members who don't know the I guess the origin of this piece was a visual piece. So I'd love for you to talk about sort of like the original creation of this piece, and then how you transitioned into this audio piece.
Sure. Originally, it was a visual poem that was meant to be in the format of a scroll, in the sense that you would scroll down it on your computer, like the mouse, but also if it was printed out, it would be like super tall. It would be like a very long, like it would be a scroll, you know? And that's like, was kind of honoring both my own like ancestral traditions being Jewish, and this is a very Jewish piece, but also honoring accessibility and allowing people who are reading it to go at their own pace. You can scroll as fast or as slow as you like. And then we went and tried to create more versions of this that would be kind of a translation. So it started out as a visual written piece with colors, according to like like LGBTQ was like a rainbow color, pink washing was pink. But those things kind of translated differently when we did an audio version. I kind of chose to use sounds, and it ended up turning into basically like a completely different piece. I consider it to be a translation, but it's also something that is like, it's an audio piece of like unto itself.
I remember some of the initial conversations that we had about this piece and how we make this piece accessible to a blind audience, right? It was like, well, like, how do you describe as words are changing, that there's color in the background and then the words are changing color, and this is all happening as you're reading it and you're scrolling through it, and it's a lot to unpack. And so you really embraced this idea and really created a new piece of art in the spirit of access for a community that doesn't access art visually. Talk to me a bit about the sound effects that you chose and how they relate or don't, or your process in how they relate maybe to the colors of the text. If there was a process, I'm curious about that.
Initially, I started out trying to correspond to them. I tried to make a sound that matched and occurred when a color was happening in the text. But basically, once I got through like 15 seconds of it, I was like, this isn't happening. Like, it ends up being a different emphasis when I'm speaking this out loud than when you're reading it or when I'm reading it. So it initially, I tried to make them kind of match. I tried to make it be like a process of translation, and it didn't happen. It turned into something else. That was really, I don't know. It's really exciting. I'm also really trying hard to work on to have accessibility as a creative practice for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for everyone, but like of my own creative practice. And so that was also like really exciting for me, because that was a way that I could practice that.
Mm-hmm. And you have the talent, obviously, to be able to do that in terms of what it takes technically to, edit some of this stuff together, which I think is also really lovely that you took up that challenge to create an audio piece. And I appreciate it because otherwise I'd be either struggling to try and read the words with my partial sight or trying to listen to it with a screen reader. And I do know it was made available in a transcript form for folks to just sort of read plainly or use screen readers. But I appreciate the intention that comes through your voice as you're reading it. That's a whole different layer for me as an access piece. So maybe talk to me about, I don't know, was that challenging for you? Like, were you trying to think to yourself, I really want my audience to interpret this the way they interpret it and not the way I'm air quotes feeding it to them? But was there a process around that you were thinking about how you were going to deliver what you had written?
I don't know. I feel that I am someone who's very drawn to talking in the first place. Right, making a written piece was kind of a diversion for me. It was kind of like a diversion from my normal practices. I'm typically more of like a visual artist, or like I'll speak about things. So it kind of almost just like happened when I was doing the spoken word piece a lot more easily than it actually did when I was trying to write the poem in the first place. So there was actually less of a process once I got to the audio part, because I was just like, oh yeah, I know how to talk. I'm great at talking.
Maybe Mickey, share with us a bit about like the creation of the content, because there's a lot of really deep stuff in here. And I think, could be a lot of stuff that people haven't maybe heard before if they don't identify with, being Jewish or being queer or being any of the things that are talked about. So talk to me a bit about the message that you're trying to impart on your audience, why it's so important to talk about these things.
Yeah. where we are on Turtle Island with the colonial name of North America, Israel is often seen in a very like positive light by Canadian media and politicians and American too. I'm not as familiar with in Mexico, but it's generally on this continent, the state of Israel is looked upon very positively. And within my own experience of the Jewish community, it's like if the way it's communicated to me and the way I've seen it actually play out is like, if you aren't supporting the state of Israel, you're like a traitor as a Jew, like you're a traitor to your people. And so it's seen very much like kind of, it's very much tied in with this like nationalistic identity that actually only emerged in like 1967 with the founding of that actual state. But being there is seen as like a lot of the time when you look at like travel advertisements, especially for like Tel Aviv, they really try to say like, oh, it's like the most queer friendly city in the Middle East. It's the most queer friendly place that you're gonna have. But it's like, that's not actually a true statement if you're like a Black queer person, if you're a Black trans queer person, if you're someone who's like brown skin who could be mistaken for Palestinian, for example. Those identities complicate that. And that's also something that's what actually pinkwashing is. Pinkwashing means when you try to say that things are super queer friendly to cover up all the other kinds of nastiness that's going on. And so for me, like there was a lot of conflicting existences, embodiments that I had here as someone who's trans and who is like also like perceived as white by the world, and sometimes even as not Jewish. I'm able to move through the world as that way. And but I'm very much like connected to those things as much as I'm connected to my anti-Zionism, which is complicated and was something that kind of Courage talked about it a little bit, like the Black Lives Matter movement was really impactful on me in terms of thinking about how I relate to race in my Jewish existence and in my queer existence. And that's also what this work was about processing for me, and also being really open about with everybody else and with sharing this, because I think that it's these conversations kind of sometimes happen, but it's sometimes in communities, it can be very like, it stops once the conversation ends. It's not like a whole community conversation that's happening, which, yeah, I guess is also a goal of me sharing this so openly.
Yeah, I really appreciate you about you saying that. And I love artists that take the opportunity to, I call it kind of a little bit like edutainment, right? You're educating, you're entertaining, you're poking us to have these discussions, which for many folk, if it's not your lived experience, you're not necessarily in a place where you're having these kinds of discussions on a regular basis. And if you are, sometimes they're coming from a place of assumption because you're talking about a subject that you don't have any lived experience about, right? And so I think that's one of the great things about having all three of the artists in this space tonight, to be able to share a bit about the meaning behind their work. And again, like I even know that that's controversial, because sometimes it's like, well, what does it mean to you? Not what does it mean to me meaning to you? What does it mean to you? But certainly as a person who experiences this kind of art very differently, I love having the extra lens that the artist brings in terms of the discussion and what they want to share. There's a lot to unpack in this, and I think you're really right in saying that sometimes when the discussion happens, the action stops, right? Like we're only engaged in the discussion in the moment, and then nothing comes out of it. So what is your hope for a piece like this in terms of progressing forward, or other pieces, other work that you do to keep moving, to keep that conversation alive? I don't know if you want to share some thoughts on that.
I would love to. I also want to add a bit of context about some of the language that I used. Like in this work, I used the word dyke as like a reclaiming of kind of a slur that's been used against me as a lesbian. But I've also found out that the origin of that word is that it's like African-American vernacular English for just a Black lesbian. And that slur is also like racially derogatory towards Black folks. And so like I've stopped using that word to call myself. I'm not a Black lesbian, so that word is not for me. So that even though that word is in there, I'm also just adding that context of my own learning journey. I think that that is, I guess, a bit of an example of what I hope to happen is like, I hope for people to kind of have conversations and learn and listen and have those things to be able to like continue to have that ripple, because I think that's what activism and what the goal of like revolutionary work, you know, I don't want to live under capitalism for the rest of my life. I think that that's what that's about, is keeping it on and seeing how our actions can compound with each other. So I hope that folks can take this, which I see as some activism on my part, and take it and run with it, you know, wherever that takes you. But yeah, just activism of like making, I see activism as like making the lives easier for those around you and yourself.
Right. I love that. Mickey, you're sticking around for the Q&A at the end, correct?
Yes, I am.
So I'm going to ask our audience members to think about questions that they may have for Mickey as well about this piece, about Mickey as an artist. And we'll invite those questions in a little bit. But thank you so much, Mickey, for sharing us this piece. I enjoyed spending time with you as we were talking about this in the early stages before the festival, and really happy to share this with my community. So thank you very much for being here, and we'll talk to you again shortly.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. All right, friends, we're going to transition into our final digital piece of the evening, and then on to our Q&A, where audience members will have an opportunity to ask questions of our artists in the space. And I think that that's the beauty of this space in terms of access, is that we have the opportunity to ask questions or get gaps filled in where we didn't understand, or things described where we need a little more description. So I want to invite Minah and Yun-Jou back to the space, and you're going to introduce this next piece, Minah, I'm guessing. So what would you like to say about New Normal?
Thank you. New Normal, an embodied novel by Margaret-Dragu, written in collaboration with Justin A. Chamber, and using film vocabularies. So you'll see what that means, and it's about navigating the cityscape and the day-to-day with mobility challenge.
Okay, awesome. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll let the work just kind of, talks about itself.
Okay, awesome. So this video, friends, is approximately 8 minutes long, and it's got some extended description. So at moments, if you're following along and you're partially sighted, at moments, the video pauses to make room for the description. So it's not your screen freezing, but I just thought I'd let you know. And afterwards, we'll come back and we'll talk with Margaret-Dragu, who is one of the creators of this piece. So Rick, why don't you go ahead and play New Normal?
Pre-show. This dance film explores contralateral movement with opposite sides of the body. Contralateral, stretching an arm or leg along and diagonal across the body, or taking a step with the left foot, swinging the right arm. The film interweaves and collages different sources or viewpoints. The first viewpoint is video filmed on a cell phone held by the filmmaker Margaret, where she is not shown or only her limbs come into view. The second is video footage of Margaret doing physiotherapy exercises. These two viewpoints sometimes fill the screen, sometimes are shown playing on Margaret's big screen TV or on the laptop of her collaborator Justine. Margaret has short gray hair. Only Justine's limbs moving contralaterally in front of her appear on screen as she films from a cell phone. A red curtain opens, a city street, a crane on a construction site, an articulated red city bus passes. Title in pink, New Normal, an embodied novel, Chapter 4.
139, 140. 143, 144.
Title continues, Relearning Contralateral.
179, 180.
Cars turn through an intersection in a commercial area. A sunny day, pale grass and leafy trees on all corners.
181, 182, 183.
141, 142.
In pink text, from the intersection of Kingsway and Earls. The view spins 360 degrees, lands on the sidewalk. The camera shakes for a moment. Cut to indoors, Justine's laptop shows a video of a car parked in an alley beside tall green bushes. On the laptop screen, pink text, Counting. Justine's left hand dips contralaterally, her hand a ripe pear dripping off the branch of her arm.
200, 201, 202, 203.
Right knee raises up into her touch. Her arm retracts, passing slowly in front of the laptop screen, flexes her hand.
204, 205, 206, 207, 208.
The laptop video morphs to Margaret exercising in a long fluorescent-lit hallway using two canes. The hallway fills our view. She practices walking slowly with high knee raises, her back to the camera, careful steps. An orb of light shines from beneath the exit door at the far end. The hallway dissolves to the street, the car by the high bushes.
209, 210, 211, 212.
We pass the parked car, taking slow steps down the alley. Margaret, in profile, she completes physiotherapy exercises with the two canes midway down the lonely hallway of a seniors building.
213,
335, 336, 337.
A collage of images, parked cars on the street, Justine's left hand passes in front of her laptop, a sidewalk, trees, homes, the laptop's video of Margaret exercising in the hallway. The collage dissolves to a residential street flanked by bushes and trees. The camera moves slowly, tilting with the asymmetry of Margaret's gait.
142, 143,
360, 361,
144.
363, 364, 365, 366, 367.
Patches of bare lawn. A for sale sign waits at one home. Back in the hallway, Margaret, with her two canes, walks backward toward the camera, lifts and lowers each leg, precise, measured.
307, 808.
The hallway dissolves, a stretch of sidewalk at the senior housing courtyard, melts to the indoors, Margaret's big screen TV, displaying the view down the residential sidewalk with the house for sale.
359, 360, 361, 362, 363.
Margaret's palm up, fingers open like a candelabra, a contralateral reach, her right hand contralateral, beckoning. Arms repeat as the TV now shows Margaret in the hallway doing mobility exercises, her back to the camera. A glimpse of the courtyard on the TV, dissolving into Margaret lying in a narrow bed, a gray sheet with white chevrons. One leg bent, the other straight. Loose green capri pants. She presses her left hand down on her left hip flexor, right leg extends into the air.
364, 365, 366, 367, 810, 811, 12, 13, 814, 815, 816, 817, 818, 819.
Layered collage of images as Justine's left knee in salmon-colored pants and her right arm stretched contralaterally retract. Flash to the courtyard, cut to an elevator door opening. The world bends, Margaret stretches. A shot of Justine's laptop floats into view over the image of Margaret. On the floating laptop screen, the same view of her stretching, stabilizing on the bed, the tension of a bow and arrow being drawn.
303, 304.
Dissolved to Justine's laptop on a long black table. Beyond the table, a large painting, white space with red, blue, black eyeballs, fish-like, bird-like, airplane-like image. Beyond the table, an 1880s filing cabinet, and the kitchen, a red brick wall. Justine's left hand reaches contralaterally, a black sweater sleeve, a silver band on the traffic finger. Her arm obscures the laptop, her right knee contralateral. Fingers drape over it like wet fabric. The laptop shows Margaret doing bridge exercises on her bed, raising and lowering her pelvis, as her feet sink into the mattress, creating small depressions in the memory foam. Cut to the elevator doors closing for the blink of an eye. Margaret doing bridge exercises.
305
946, 947, 948,
900
950.
901 902 903
Margaret, now in a snazzy red printed dress and purple yoga pants, lying on her back in bed. Hands are raised, framing our frame. Feet planted, knees raised. She holds an iPad between her knees, legs and hips still. Her thighs frame the device. Showing on the iPad screen, Margaret doing the bridge exercises from a moment before. Through the window to her left, thick green foliage. To her right, a warped sliver of light from the kitchen. Reaches contralaterally, left, right, as the iPad shows elevator buttons and the elevator door opening into the long, empty senior housing hallway.
888,
Margaret doing bridge exercises on her bed.
889,
As her hips settle, the scene dissolves to the inside of the elevator, the array of buttons. The door opens on the second floor. View turns out of the elevator and to the right.
890,
51, 952.
Now Margaret's living room. On the big screen TV, a replay of exiting the elevator. Margaret stands facing the TV, holding a wooden dowel in her right hand like a cane. Kicks her left leg contralaterally. On the TV, a fire extinguisher mounted on the wall of the lonely hallway.
952, 953,
891,
Cut to the hallway, turning past the fire extinguisher, moving toward Margaret's spare apartment door.
954, 955, 956, 957, 958, 959.
A composite on screen, Margaret on her stomach on the bed, lifts her flexed right foot, knee bent, as a smaller view of her big screen TV shows the same scene. Left ankle hooks the edge of the bed, an anchor. A lush potted plant extends its leaves out beyond the TV. Back in the living room, Margaret's arms reach contralaterally as the image of her on screen continues exercising on the gray and white chevron sheets. She reaches right knee, left arm, as the screen shows vibrant, lush green trees just outside the lonely hallway window by her door.
960, 961, 962, 963, 964, 965, 966.
TV cuts to a blue background with pink text, 966 steps from Kingsway and Earls to my place. She gives the screen 2 thumbs up.
966. 966.
Credits. Novel, Margaret Dragu. Choreography, Justine A. Chambers. Performers, Justine A. Chambers, Margaret Dragu. Vocalists, Makiko Hara, Francisco Fernando Granados, Margaret Dragu. Logo for Dragu Worker International.
Okay, welcome back. All right, so that's going to be the end of our 3 media pieces tonight. And now we've got Margaret in the space, so we'll get Margaret spotlit friends. Hi, Margaret, nice to see you. It's been a long time since I've seen you.
It's great to see you, Amy. It's been since Theatre Replacement, like 3 years ago.
2019, yeah.
Wow, great to be with you.
Really, really excited for you to share with us this piece. I've got a lot of questions, as you can imagine, to make this piece with audio description. There's a lot to unpack, and so my brain is kind of swimming with a whole bunch of stuff. But so first off, let's just start with the idea of like where this idea comes from to be able to share this in this mixed media environment.
The idea to have such a strong vocal transcription, you mean forward for?
Well, I think what I'm thinking about is the narrative that
just
you're talking about here.
Piece, yeah. So this is I now have 2 new hip replacements. Yay. I'm a bionic woman. Yes. And this was, over 10 years of surgery and physiotherapy, but really even more years of a lot of pain. You were with me when I was dancing with 2 canes, but I also had a 4-wheel walker and stuff. Anyways, I was on public transit, and I began to keep a journal of kind things people did for me in public, just so I could kind of cope as I was going through my journey of surgery and healing. And then, of course, I also wrote down other things. So there's also not some stories that are not quite quite as happy. But anyways, so there's a long project about this that I've been doing with Justine for a long time. This particular one is focusing on contralateral movement, which is really how we walk. And when you have lots of surgeries, you have to learn to walk again. So you have to find the contralateral. It's a really interesting experience to go from not being able to do it at all and then to be able to walk again. So that's essentially what this particular chapter is.
Right, because this is chapter 4 of, so there are 3 chapters before this, correct?
There's actually 13 chapters.
Oh my
and there's
goodness.
many chapter 4s, and all of them are what we call our touring chapters. And they're when
Okay.
like while we're waiting to finish this piece, we go crazy and we think, let's make something that we can show right now. And so we make what we call a chapter 4 that refers to chapter 11 in the United States when people go, big companies go broke.
Bankrupt, yep.
Bankrupt,
Yep.
and they declare themselves chapter 11. Well, me and Justine, when we feel we have to share something with the world, we say, let's do a chapter 4.
Talk to me about, like, I noticed that obviously there's a lot of counting of steps. And as I transition through this piece, listening to it, I think they're going to have to tell me eventually what this counting is all about. And you do. So thank you for that, because I keep wondering
Mystery
why all
solved.
the counting, mystery solved. But there are other languages in counting numbers. And I wonder if you can share with us what that's all about, how that integrates with this piece.
Well, of course, vocal transcription or audio captioning or any of the ASL translations that we do are all translations, and they reflect on how we translate for other languages. And we live where we're constantly translating. Most people come from either a refugee or an immigrant culture and come with other languages, or if they're actually indigenous, then they have also their own languages. So we have all these languages going on all the time. And I like to have a lot of languages because it kind of brings everybody to that place of being slightly not knowing what's happening. Like you know a little bit of your language and a little bit of the language you're learning, but your learner language. And you at this, by the time that you can kind of figure out in this video that you by the end, you might think you can actually speak Japanese and Spanish because there's counting and you can kind of figure it out. That's how we all learn to cope in public.
I wonder too, and this is an assumption that I'm making based on my experience of listening to this piece, is that because you're talking a bit about the way it's set up is a bit about your journey and like the rehabilitation from the surgery, right? The physiotherapy, the sort of relearning how to walk, which was something that was so natural to you for so many years, and that process. But I wonder if I extrapolated my own brain, I think about these languages being kind of this way of connecting, like this experience is your experience, but it could be anybody's experience. Like we are not all promised a healthy body or to be free of injury for our entire lives. And so whatever lens you're coming to this piece from, it could be you counting your steps in a process like this.
Absolutely. I so love that you see that, Amy, and feel that.
Sometimes I wonder if I'm just making it up, but you know what I mean? But
no, I love that you feel that because kind of, I would say the essence of kind of performance art and conceptual dance is to have multiple meanings and experiences at the same time in the audience, as opposed to just one. And so I love it that people can have a parallel and emotional experience to what I'm doing and showing and acting out, but their version is just as important and just as vital. So I love that. I love that you could feel that.
Well, again, like the relationship to the three of you as artists and this idea of provoking discussion around the pieces that you do is one of the ways that I really like to experience art. I also have this question in terms of the filmmaking aspect of this, Margaret, in terms of, so the way the describer talks about this collage of images. So like, you know, I feel like it's got to be a layering of indoor and outdoor and elevator. And like, you know, so if you're looking at this image, you're like, huh, that's interesting. There's a hallway in the middle of a, you know, treed courtyard in the middle, right? Like it's this meshing of stuff. And so as a filmmaker and as an artist, what are you saying by layering these images in this way?
Well, of course, our reality as most folks coping, you know, this was also before COVID, but we have a very screened experience, and there's layers of screens. There's our tiny phone, and then there's our iPad, and then there's our computer, and there's the window, and there's the TV set, and there's the big screen, and there's the big advertising outside on the street. That screen. There's a whole bunch of screens in public transit now, that more than there ever was. Screens on screens. So I wanted to have that layered sense of coping in the urban world with all of these screens. But of course, the non-transcribed version is quite short, right? It's like, I think it's probably like 3 minutes or something. And, and the described version is much longer. And I just love how for this translation, we just decided we want to privilege this transcription. And so it really, Cheryl Green, our audio transcriber, she's the star of this particular version, as is all the ASL interpreter of the other version. Is they're really dancing. They have, in fact, I think their screen is even just there's two screens side by side, left and right, and the ASL translator is a little bigger. And I love the fact that they are the star.
Yeah. I think what's really interesting to me, and again, like, you know, this is a lot of audio description to take in. I appreciate that the video had been paused to sort of let me experience what some of that audio description was, but it's a lot to take in and a lot to process. But I think what it does quite nicely is when you explain to me this idea of being bombarded by screen images everywhere, I kind of feel that from the description, because my hearing senses are being bombarded by all of these sort of ideas as well. And so I wonder if that was a purposeful choice.
Totally.
Translation.
Totally, Amy. And of course, it's not that we're looking to create a translation that is exactly the same as. It never is the same as. I mean, even with languages. I mean, if we did a Japanese version, idiomatically, it would be very, very different, and culturally, it would resonate and sort of create experiences in very different ways. So no translation is the same as. It's completely different. But that we can give you that quality of being kind of overwhelmed. Yeah, that's great.
Well, this is, you know, as long as folks, I guess, understand that that's kind of what they're meant to experience, right? And sometimes in the audio description world, we don't know that that's sort of done on purpose to sort of bombard our senses, or whether it's like, oh, they've just tried to describe too much.
Yes.
So it seems like that was a real intention in this piece.
Yes, not all of the things that we do with Cheryl is quite so dense in terms of description, but we really wanted it to be for this one. Yeah.
How are you doing these days, Margaret, in terms of your I don't want to call it rehabilitation, but your physiotherapy in terms of
I think every person who has one and or two hip replacements all say, oh, I wish I would have done this earlier. I mean, I do wish I would have done this earlier, but what the hell, I'm here now. So I'm so happy I did. I'm also so grateful that I had this done before the pandemic, because I've had a lot of isolation issues. Everybody has. It's hard times for everyone, right? But it was so much easier having more mobility. I'm still teaching. I'm still teaching dance and personal training and yoga. I do it online. I have personal training clients. I'm working with people with clinical issues, from heart clients and breast cancer preparers and survivors from surgery, all the people that I really love to work with. So I'm great.
I love to hear that. And I, when I met you, like you said, you were using the forearm crutches. And I wonder how, and I don't want this to be too controversial a question, Margaret, but I wonder about your trajectory as an artist, from kind of being an able-bodied artist for all intents and purposes to experiencing disability to maybe not experiencing disability in the same way.
Yeah.
So how does that change your artistry, your advocacy?
This project, of course, has spanned all of this, right? I mean, I've never called myself an artist with a disability. I don't identify as a disabled artist. I was just an artist who had a fairly long-term mobility issue. So I'm quite specific about that. But it totally helped me change my practice completely, of course, right? You have to work with what you got. That's what I had for years. And so, and I was always working with clinical practice. I came into trying to change my art practice through my practice as a teacher, as a personal trainer, right? But in fact, our first conversations, Amy, when at Theatre Replacement, I talked about what I was doing with visually impaired groups for years and others, and you encouraged me to try different things and to get more involved. And of course, now I'm also taking all those workshops with Kay Slater and working with those folks in Carmen Papaplia and you, and all the things you talked about, of course, those years back now, of course, make more sense because it's not until you're actually doing it,
right,
that it makes sense. And then, as Justine and I are always talking with each other and saying, well, now that we know a little bit how to do this, these different versions, these ASL versions, the captioning versions, the vocal transcription versions, why would you ever go back and not do it?
Right. So it's really become sort of a bedrock of your practice moving forward. Again, it's an assumption, but it sounds like that's exactly what it sounds like. Is as an artist, you're thinking about how other people can engage with your artwork if they may have barriers to.
Yeah. And once you do that, of course, then the people you work with also subtly transform. You have more people with various abilities or differences that you're working with all the time. And so that's transformative. I'm very excited what's happening now. I think this is the most positive part of the pandemic, is the pausing and reassessing, and for institutions, whether they're small or big, to try and make some changes. So the people at the Grunt and the people at Cinevolution, I'm so excited about having people like you all working together to try and make some change.
I hope that is one of the things, again, those of us who are equity seeking people have known for years where the gaps are in the various systems. But it is my deep hope that this is not the end of the conversations, right? That we learn and we move forward. And even if we move forward tiny steps at a time, we continue to move forward instead of going backwards. So
me too. And Kay is very encouraging as a teacher and an activist. She is always saying, yes, you're going to make a bunch of mistakes. That's okay. just start.
Yeah, that's right. If we don't jump in and start because we're afraid of, air quotes, making the mistake, and I'm going to call out Mickey here, or call in Mickey, just because Mickey rightly pointed out some language usage that is a part of their journey in discovering and all those kinds of things. So if we wait to be, air quotes, perfect, we will never do anything.
Yeah.
And I think we just, we graciously, air quotes, fail forward, if that's the language that resonates. But I think for me, it's more about being on this exploration, this journey, and what the intent is. My intent is not to harm, right? But I'm going to make mistakes. I'm a human being, and I come with my lived experience and my lens, as we all do, right? So when we find out we've made a mistake, it's sort of about honoring that instead of pushing back on that, right?
Yeah, right on. You're a dynamo. I mean, look, you're making podcasts and you're organizing festivals and seminars and gathering us together to talk about these things. So thank you.
You know what, I think, you know, a part of what art is designed to do is to provoke discussion. And I love to have discussions that my community is involved in, because I think oftentimes, you know, it's quite possible that we have barriers to these discussions, or we just get left out of, or not thought about, or don't have access to for all sorts of reasons. And so it's a great opportunity to be able to have these discussions about things that, certainly for me, that aren't part of my lived experience on a day-to-day basis. And I am a lifelong learner, like I hope we all are. you know, like I said earlier, there's no finish line to any of this work. We just keep learning and from each other and growing and moving forward. So with that notion, I thank you very much for spending your time in this space. We're going to just say goodbye to you for a moment, Margaret, and then I'm going to bring Minah and Yun-Jou back in, and we're going to transition into our Q&A. So folks in the community, we're going to bring in any artists you want to talk to, but I would love for you to put your hands up and ask your questions about these pieces. There's a lot of things to drive conversation here. There might be some questions about description that you wanted to ask. So I will allow that to exist, and I'll watch for hands. You also, if you are comfortable posting in the chat, you can do that as well. We have somebody monitoring the chat as well. But first of all, I just want to go back to our you know, Cinevolution's executive director and the curator of this Digital Carnival festival, and talk a bit about the return to the theme, and how these three pieces relate to the overall theme of this festival. How do they all fit together?
Minah, do you want to start?
You go ahead, Yun-Jou.
Sure. Yeah, it's such a great question, Amy. And yeah, you know, thank you, first of all, Margaret and Courage and Mickey, for all being here this evening, and to the interpreters as well for staying with us for the event. It's such a, yeah, I think it's really exciting to be able to hear artists speak about their work and their intentions. And that's a big part of what we do at Cinevolution, is bringing, closing the gap between the artist and the audience, you know, so that we as viewers don't have to be on the outside of the artwork. We can also be insiders. I mean, these pieces, it's throughout the, you know, your conversations with each of the artists, Amy, you asked just good questions, right? But we keep coming back to some of those, you know, themes about, you know, identity, and how we, you know, see and how we perceive and how we understand ourselves and our relationship to the world. And then in contrast to how we might be perceived or labeled by the world around us, and the different things that we do, you know, either just as part of our living from day to day, to, you know, more artistic gestures of, you know, maybe pushing back against those definitions, right? So you've got Courage, who's peeling the tape off her back, and talking to herself, right? You are beautiful, you are strong, you're not afraid. To Mickey, who is, you know, editing their vocabulary, you know, as they go, and also, you know, I think stated earlier on, you know, that you know, activism for them is about making the world, making things easier for the people around them. So really, like, you know, and just the conversation just now between you and Margaret about starting where we're at, you know, and just kind of really living with that, the ever shifting, changing landscape of personal experience, and really making space for that. So for me, like, that's what I'm really, that's what really resonates, and what I keep coming back to, in terms of the theme of Z, is, you know, kind of transcending, you know, maybe our received or traditional ways of working and navigating the world, and really kind of, you know, like charting, you new waters, or and like breaking new ground in terms of like how we relate to ourselves, and how we relate to one another.
Mm-hmm. Minah, anything you'd like to add?
Totally. I mean, we really wanted to center all those artists' activism through art. And also we were thematically interested in vulnerability, as we mentioned, that actually mobilizes the kind of like people to bond and act, or find creative ways to fight, resist. So I think those are the kind of like threads that tie all of the arts together.
The ties that bind, right? We have a hand from Lori, so I'm going to ask Lori to unmute and ask your question or share your comment. You're still on mute, Lori. Oh, I think we got you.
Okay, what I was gonna, oh.
Now you've muted yourself again, Lori. Seems like we're having just a few audio problems, but you're unmuted, Lori.
Okay.
We can hear you.
What I was going to say about Margaret, when she's doing all the thinking about counting, it reminded me when I had my knee replacement 8 months ago. I did a lot of that physical therapy about counting to exercise the knee. So it's kind of interesting to hear this video and how all the counting you did for your, recovering from both of your hips replacement surgeries. So it kind of reminded me of that, how to count doing those exercises.
Thanks for that, Lori. It's also like, it reminds me, Margaret had mentioned that, without the description, this is really like a 3-minute piece, right? And so I imagine it without the description, because really the only dialogue is the counting in the various languages. And so you're kind of following, Margaret on this body journey, this walk, as the counting continues, right? And I thought that was really interesting in terms of like, what's this counting all about? What's this count? And then like at the end, it's like I said, thank you for telling me, because it's like, I would have walked away so disappointed if I didn't know what the counting was about. But I think that it's a really it resonates really strongly with Lori too. So thank you for sharing that, Lori. An invitation to friends again in the audience. Oh, we've got a hand. Hang on. My glasses tell me it's Myra. Myra has a question or a comment. Give Myra a moment to unmute.
Yeah, I'm unmuted now. Excuse me. I just have to say that I loved all 3 pieces. They were just amazing. But I also love the fact that each one told us the colors that were here or there, what people were wearing, the gray hair that Margaret had, so on. And that just brings everything to life for me. And so thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Myra, for sharing that. I think it's always really nice to be able to give feedback when folks go, I hate to say out of your way, but we're still in this world where it's looked at as out of your way to make something accessible. So I think it's very nice for you to share how much you appreciate that level of detail. So thank you for that. I would love to ask, and this is something I would love to ask all of the artists in terms of their work that's shared tonight. And I'm going to just ask this question and then we'll go to your question, Louise. So hang on one moment. But I guess what I want to know is how you have been impacted by the pandemic in terms of your artistry. And maybe we'll go to Courage first. I know this is going to be some tricky spotlighting stuff, folks, but bear with us. So if we can have Courage and one of the interpreters up. And then we'll go to Mickey and then we'll go to Margaret. We'll just do it in the order that the pieces were shared. So Courage, for yourself, how has the pandemic impacted your work as an artist?
Oh, wow. Yeah, the pandemic definitely impacted my work as an artist, staying at home. It was a real challenge for me. I really had to try to adapt during that time. And that really helped my creativity more. actually with that journey with my work. So it did help. Yeah. And I felt that my isolation really did help my ideas and help me to be more creative.
This is totally coming to my mind. I'm just going to ask this since I have you right in this space. You referred to something called code switching in your work. And I wanted to make sure that everybody in this space knew what you meant by code switching. Are you comfortable sharing with this group what that means?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so code switching is when you change your language to match or satisfy whoever you're speaking with. Generally, it happens with people that or adapt your language for people that you're speaking with. So you might feel that the way that you speak you may be judged for it or whichever reasons. So you might switch to the way that you speak to another person in order to adapt culturally or anything like that. So it's a bit of a negotiation that happens with your own language in order to be able to communicate. And so it is exhausting for people to code switch. And to be honest, for myself, I really value who I am in my language. And it's a part of my journey too. It's just to be my authentic self is something that I really value. And so, yeah, code switching can be very, very tiring.
Thank you for highlighting that for us. I know from my experience within the disability community, we also do a lot of code switching. If we're in community together, we might just shoot the breeze and be honest about, silly things that people say to us out in the world and the ableism that we experience. But then, when you go into a job interview, you sometimes have to pretend that you have more of an ability than you do because you feel like you won't get the job. So you're switching how you're speaking to different people depending on what you need and how comfortable you are in that environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. Yeah, that's exactly how code switch as well too. It has some positive and some negatives as well too. When you're going out for a job interview or for school or something like that, with home or your family, you might have a different way of speaking as well too. It's going to depend on the environment that you're in. So yeah, and it can be really tiring. It does have benefits as well too. I feel like it can give you a sense of safety as well too, but it can be very, very tiring.
Well, thank you for highlighting that for us. Mickey, how about for yourself? And we'll give it just a moment for some spotlighting, and maybe we can bring up Mickey and Margaret at the same time. But Mickey, I'd love for you to share with us a bit about, what you're doing as an artist during the pandemic, or if you've experienced like Courage as an opportunity to be more creative, or that there's barriers to your creativity. How has that impacted you as an artist?
Yeah, it's definitely had its pros and cons. For my own access needs, it's been easier in some ways of things being online. I have a lot of things having to do with situations that I'm in, and being able to just leave by pressing an X or by pressing leave is oh my gosh, amazing. You can't do that when you're in a room with someone. It's it gets awkward.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I really appreciated that, and being able to be in my safe space when I'm making work is something that, or a physical safe space at least, is something that I've been really grateful for. But as someone who considers myself to be a community-based artist and a social practice artist, it's been really difficult to adapt to engaging with people socially, to creating community in an online environment. It definitely, right now I'm thinking about union in the back of my head because of that. I'm how
hard
do we
not to
engage, when we're just online? How do we make a community? How do we make that intimacy when we're just having these digital mediums? And so it's been that has been a very big pivot for me. And at the same time, also a part of that, also the accessibility needs. can be difficult. You know, it's hard to, sometimes you can tell when someone needs help because you can like, you're around them.
Yeah.
They're like,
you're picking up cues.
You get those cues, right? But sometimes when you're online, you don't have those ways of like intuiting that. People have to be much more explicit about what their needs are, which can be tricky to navigate in, for example, an event like this, if I wanted to host an event.
Yeah, you're right. It does put the onus on whoever is in front of their screen to say, I need this in this moment. And not everybody is comfortable doing that. What we've created here at VocalEye is this community of folks who identify as being blind and partially sighted, and they're joining us from all over the place, all over Turtle Island, all over the United States. We've had visitors from Japan and Australia. And so we found this way to build community and to break down some barriers, not all barriers to arts, but there's, oftentimes not a lot of accessible art out in the world. So we bring it here and we, take it apart. We also, there's no ticket fee, there's no transportation issue. And so if you feel relatively comfortable navigating your screen reader or your device, that's really the biggest barrier. But Zoom has been relatively accessible for the most part. I'm not saying it wasn't a learning curve, because it certainly was. But the community's really embraced this platform. So thank you, Mickey, for sharing your perspective. Margaret, I wonder for you, again, the same question about the pandemic and your work as an artist and what the impact has been and how you navigate that.
I think something that I hope to continue to remember, and I hope I go forward with, is a change about, grinding away. I used to work in the community center for 30 years, and as a personal trainer and a fitness attendant and a weight room attendant and yoga teacher, and also a dance teacher in dance studios. And generally the ethic was that if you were sick and you could not find someone to sub your class, you went in sick. That's just how it was. And kind of theaters like that too, of like, I have a fever of 105, but the show must go on.
Must go on. Yeah.
And that is stupid. And so the pandemic, I think, has taught us, if you're sick, you should stay home. And if this is going to be better for you, and it's going to be better for your family, it's going to be better for everybody you work with. So I really hope we can stop doing that. And also what I've noticed, and mostly projects are I have some big projects that go on, but mostly there's a lot of little projects. And so it's kind of a bit more amenable to this, but because of code switching and because of Black Lives Matter and because of trying to change systemic issues around gender and race and abilities and just so many things that we're trying to grapple with, particularly everybody that I work with, the LGBTQ BIPOC folk, are often involved in very intense committees or working towards change inside wherever they are working, right? And so when I'm working with them, they will call and say, I'm so exhausted. I need 3 days off. I'm depressed, or my child is sick, and I just can't do this. And I think before the pandemic, I might have been judgmental if that came up a lot. And now I don't. I listen to this. This is like a totally real thing. Whether you have a very visible and apparent ability, disability, or difference, or whether you're under the gears for whatever mental or physical issues that you're dealing with. I just think it's so important to support each other and to have a different sense of time. And I hope I've learned that during the pandemic, and I hope I keep practicing that, and I hope I can get other people to do that too.
We haven't been maybe so great as human beings at being kind to one another and making space for this idea of family and live life like life-work balance, and what we in the disability community might call it crip time. Like it takes time in the morning to get yourself up if you have a personal support worker that comes in, and how that impacts your day-to-day activity and the amount of capacity that one has in a day. So I think that that's really, again, if we look at silver linings from the pandemic, I hope it's something that sticks.
Me too.
Because it's better off for all of us. Thank you for sharing that, Margaret. Louise, you have a hand, and I want to get to your question. Thank you for giving me the space to let our artists answer that question. So you can unmute yourself, Louise.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, I'm really going back to the first one. I can't think of the name of the first
Union?
lady.
Are you talking about Union?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, not Union. The first video.
Reflection of Me. Courage's video.
Yes.
Reflection of
Yeah.
Me. Yeah.
Okay, but all three hit. But that one hit in many ways because I've grown up with more than one disability, and when she was stripping away the tapes, peeling away or stripping them away, the signs with each word on it, it was like, I can't explain it. It was like a healing, and sitting there saying, look at how I've changed and how I've grown. And I'm stripped away some of mine over the years and still more to go. It's like it's an ongoing process of healing. And we all have to accept each other where they are and who they are. And if we don't like someone's color, the fact they can't hear us, they can't see us, we can't see them, if we can't walk the same way or run or do something someone else can do, don't criticize. Let them be acceptance of others. And that is, I mean, the story hit me because of my own healing and what I'm working through.
Thank you for sharing that, Louise. It's very kind of you to share that vulnerability in this space. So thank you for.
But I just want to say thank you for making me realize what I was doing.
Yeah, I too think that Courage's work is impactful in that way, to allow us all to have the space to look at ourselves and love ourselves for the way we are, despite what other people think, right? Like that's where the healing begins, is within yourself. And that's a journey for everybody. I think we all have baggage and insecurities and labels, and it's really important to take a moment to just know who you are and learn who you are and love who you are. And I think the world becomes this is the optimistic in me. The world becomes a little bit of a brighter place once you love yourself first. And that really resonates with me as well. So thank you for sharing that. All right, friends. Well, I have so many questions, and there's so many guests in this space. Oh goodness, now we have another hand. Hang on, friends. It's Andrew. Andrew has a hand. Andrew, would you like to unmute yourself?
Sure, I can do that.
Awesome. What's your question or comment, Andrew?
It was a really impressive evening. The support from so many people on each of the projects was really something. I was just wondering about the first piece, Union. Did the artists talk about alchemy at all while they were discussing it? Because so many of the images there seem to come from alchemical images of marriage and things underground being brought to the light and things like that.
That sounds like a Yun-Jou question to me.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew, for bringing that up. The artists actually didn't talk a lot about alchemy, though I do think there are a lot of that metaphor and symbolism definitely exists in the painting. But what they did talk a lot about was materials, materiality in the future, so in the post-apocalyptic world, what are we left with? And so one of the things they really worked with a lot is plastic. which is so complicated, of course, and because the dystopian universe is also emerged from an apocalypse, right? So the artists are also thinking about the climate crisis, and what the outcome might be of that, and what that means for what remains for us to work with. And they also talked about, for example, books and physical archives being burnt for fuel. So like the way, I think they were thinking more maybe about the way we are consuming, but I think certainly also how we are extracting. And I think you're right also about kind of that transformative process, like almost kind of like transmutation that can happen. But I really appreciate that. And I'll certainly take back to the artist as this question came up and ask them.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for that, Andrew. What's next for Cinevolution? What's coming up? Are we preparing for next year's festival, or what's happening?
Yeah, well, we were talking about this a little bit before the curtains went up, and I was joking that we're still kind of digesting this festival and working through what we learned. So actually, what we're working on right now is a research report and a set of resources and some conversations coming out of that, based on our experience creating Digital Carnival while centering accessibility, and the process of translation that we kind of went through with each artist, and with the support of the various access workers, and also the input of community members, some of which were in the VocalEye community, and Amy, herself had provided consultation and feedback. So we're hoping to capture some of those learnings and share it with other folks in the artistic community. But also to extend this conversation about what accessibility means in the context of the arts, and how do we make arts and culture programming more accessible for everyone. So that's kind of what we're working on. And then we're working on a podcast. We haven't made a lot of progress yet, but Amy, you might hear from me when we start to work on it in earnest as the resident podcaster.
Well,
all sorts of things.
I love that the work is continuing. I love that there's this focus on accessibility, and I offered the artists an opportunity to talk about the implications or the impact that the pandemic has had, and I wonder, if there's a lens that Cinevolution can provide in terms of what the pivot was like, and the challenges or the blessings, maybe even, in what we experienced with the pandemic and creating this work, and like, I guess what you learn and how you take that forward, because again, this is all about conversation, and it's like, it doesn't stop in this moment. We're going to continue this work, and what that looks like maybe moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll start, and then just also invite Minah to jump in, whenever.
Absolutely. Let's bring Minah back into the square while you're speaking.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest gifts of the pandemic was the opportunity to just re-examine our relationship with time. Because, as a nonprofit arts organization, a lot of our team members, work on Cinevolution stuff on a volunteer basis off the side of our desk. And we're always trying to do, too much with too little, and things are always rushed. And what happened when the pandemic hit was it forced us to slow down, because a physical festival with 10,000 people, it's not happening. So that gave us the opportunity to actually take stock once the shock kind of passed, right? But to take stock of where we were at, and what the implications were. And so we got to think through, okay, so if we go online, like, what does that mean? What does it mean for a Digital Carnival to go online? What are our core values as a festival and as an organization? We want to make art accessible to the general public. So then who is that, and who have we been missing? And that's when it became very clear that we had not really deeply considered the disability community and their experiences, and the barriers that they might encounter beyond sort of the basics, right, of like physical access ramps and gender neutral bathrooms. That's kind of where we were at the beginning of this process. And then we went on to then we had the opportunity to reach out to other organizations and to learn and to talk to community members and to have consultative conversations. And that led to all the relationships that we subsequently built and the work that was made possible through this year's festival. So I just think we were able to be a lot more deliberate and to spend time with the artists and all of our different collaborators.
Minah, how about for yourself? Anything you'd like to add?
Sure. I think we really enjoyed all kinds of collaboration with the artists, also access workers, and our accessibility consultations. Just taking, the time to discuss and listen and talk, learn. It was the really longest term collaboration we could pursue during the pandemic, and kind of resources that became available during that time. And yeah, with the kind of magic, with the magical alignment with our feature exhibition, or so online programming that actually really came out of the pandemic. So all of those long-term processes, those were the biggest gifts.
And do you consider, I guess, that the next festival that will come up hopefully in 2022 at some point will be a hybrid approach that will have, like, because this 2021 was kind of a hybrid approach too, because it had an in-person exhibition, but this exploration of continuing this approach?
I think we might slow down. We actually kind of really learned to benefit from slowing down, and also taking that, giving each other that room that is needed. And probably we just kind of like kept going on and on and on until, and even during the pandemic, we slowed down, but also like continue to really pushing ourselves forward. So yeah, we might really reevaluate and work towards longer term sustainability of Cinevolution and its programs.
Like taking a break as a radical art action.
A little bit of that.
Well, I just, from deep down in my heart and in my soul, I want to extend a big thank you, certainly to the artists who spent time with us here tonight. And I know it's challenging when we have so many guests in the space to give everybody as much equal time as possible. But a really big thank you to Courage Bacchus, to Mickey Morgan, to Margaret Dregu for joining us tonight and sharing your time and your artistry with us. Before I let Yun-Jou and Minah go, we have a prize draw. In fact, friends, we have 4 prize draws to get to tonight. We typically only have 1, maybe 2, but we have 4 tonight for folks who are in the blind and partially sighted community. And what the prize is tonight, they're all the same. And there's a really fantastic play that the Belfry Theater has done called Same Old, and it's been described by our very own Eileen Barrett. I've had the pleasure of seeing it and hearing it. It's a beautiful show. And so we're giving tickets to this show, and it's going to be live streamed on Sunday. So basically, you'll get your ticket, then you can log in and get a link, and you'll have the link for an extended period of time after Sunday to be able to enjoy it at your leisure. So we're going to draw 4 tickets to this virtual show that is accessible. So friends, I'm going to ask Minah to kick us off with the draw. Sarah will bring you out. Sarah's got the list of names of folks who are still in the room. And Minah, I don't know, we always encourage somebody to yell out something a little more exciting than stop, but I'm going to leave that to you. So we're going to do this twice, Minah. So I'll put you in Sarah's hands, and I'm excited to see who our winners are tonight.
Hey, Minah, anytime you're ready.
Love.
Okay, so our first straw winner is Myra. I could be pronouncing it wrong. I apologize.
You're talking about Myra Rodriguez?
Yes, Myra.
All right, Myra, you've won a ticket.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Do you think I'll still be able to access it next weekend, like, the 1st, 2nd of October?
Oh, that's a darn good question. Well, we might have to, I don't know about that, Myra. I think the streaming happens on Sunday and then you get it for like, it's a certain number of hours that you get it after Sunday.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I will certainly take advantage of it. That's wonderful.
It's a lovely show. It's really lovely. I enjoyed it very, very much.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everybody. Okay, I'm going to mute myself now.
Thanks
think about this.
Okay, Minah, are you ready to pull another name?
Rest.
We have Pierre. I don't know if Pierre is still here.
Pierre, you're still here? Congratulations.
I am here.
Congratulations, Pierre. We're going to make sure that you get access to the link for the show. So congratulations. I hope you enjoy it. And when you come back next week, I want folks to share with us their experience with the show because I really loved it. I can't say that enough. So, and friends, if you don't win the draw tonight, you can purchase tickets to this show. And how you do that will be circulated in the email that we send out after this with some links for some Cinevolution stuff you can access, but also a link to how to get tickets for this show because I highly recommend it. Okay, thank you, Minah, for pulling two fantastic names from the community. Yun-Jou, are you ready to play the game?
I'm ready. I don't know why, but I'm really nervous.
All right, Sarah, I leave it in your hands.
Okay, Yun-Jou, anytime you're ready.
Yeah. Giraffe.
Giraffe.
We have Louise.
Louise, you win a ticket for the
Louise.
Show. Awesome. Okay. I think you'll really, really like it. So we'll connect with folks again by email with how you get to claim your tickets. And one more name.
Okay. Anytime you're ready.
VocalEye.
Nice. We have Tilo and Yuko.
Oh, so Yuko's at work tonight. So Tilo gets to claim this prize. So Tilo, you have won a ticket to the show. Again, it's a digital show. And anybody who was on the line could have accessed it tonight. So thank you, friends, for participating in the raffle. Thank you for sticking around. Some of us are joining from very far in the future. And Jou's joining us from the furthest in the future. Tell us, what time is it where you are?
It's an afternoon, so it's 12:35.
Oh, well, at least we're not keeping you up at midnight, as usually is what happens in meeting environments, but you're way, way, way in the future. So thank you so much to the two of you for joining us and sharing us some highlights from the Cinevolution Digital Carnival Z. It's really been nice to hear your perspectives and share insights and have stuff described and unpacked. So thank you to the both of you for sharing, and you're welcome back in the space anytime. That's going to end our event for this evening, friends. Thanks to everybody for joining us at another Wednesday VocalEye watch party, and we hope you come back next week.